Music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello and welcome to On the Aisle with me, Tom Alvarez. My guest on today's episode is American journalist and television presenter Phil Ponce. He is notable as the former longtime host of Chicago Tonight, a weekly television magazine of news and culture on WTTW, Chicago's public television station. Join me now as I go on the aisle in a conversation with Phil. Well, if it isn't my longtime friend, Phil Ponce, what a delight to see you.
Thank you, Tom. The pleasure is mine. You're the guy who really opened some doors for me and made it possible. So many, many thanks. I always remember what you've done for me.
Get to that, and thank you for that. I regard that as one of my proudest achievements. No, I have been following your career from the time that you left Indianapolis. But let's back up for our listeners. I would love for you to detail how it was that you became Mr. Television in Chicago. You were the host of Chicago Tonight for how many years before you retired?
Oh, about 25 or so. I really have lost track, but I was host of the program for about 25 years, and it was the highlight of my career, and it was something that I'm very proud to have been a part of.
And I have been proud to observe the trajectory of your career. I mean, it really is right out of Hollywood, I think. No, really, I was there at the very beginning. But for our listeners, I'm thrilled finally to have this platform, Phil, because, I'm heard on the internet all over the world. That's the beauty of podcasts. Do you have a podcast?
I do not have a podcast. My range is not as vast as yours.
Well, that's funny. I just turned 76 January the 1st. And when I was offered this opportunity, it's like, oh my God, I'll be an overnight success now. It took 50 years. But no, I only bring that up because we have listeners in all the major markets because I cover art, the performing arts and entertainment. So there's Chicago, New York, and LA. So I'm thrilled about that. So there'll certainly be people listening who know who Phil Ponce is. But for those who don't, why don't you kind of detail your rise in broadcasting?
Well, thanks to the help you gave me, I started out as a weekend reporter at WRTV Channel 6, which at that time was the ABC affiliate. I worked there for a couple of years, and then I was able to get a job at WBBM Television in Chicago. I was a street reporter for about 9 years. Then I segued into public broadcasting. I worked for the public broadcasting station in Chicago, WTTW, as their correspondent for a nightly television magazine of news and culture called Chicago Tonight. I did that for 5 years. And then I was hired by the NewsHour in Washington, and I was one of the anchors on the NewsHour, which was hosted then by Jim Lara. When John Calloway, the host of Chicago Tonight, retired, Channel 11 asked me to come back. And so I came back to Chicago as host of the program, and I did that for 20-some years.
And what are you doing these days?
Well, what I'm doing these days is I'm pretty much retired, although I still do regular moderating. I accept moderating assignments. For example, this coming Tuesday, I'm part of a lecture series at one of the local universities, and I will be interviewing on stage Doris Kearns Goodwin, the presidential historian.
When I reached out to Ann to find out the best way to contact you, she mentioned that you were busy researching for that interview. What a great opportunity. I'm a big fan of hers.
Doris Kearns Goodwin is known as America's historian in chief. She concentrates on presidents and she's able to put things in perspective. For example, the turmoil that we're going through now, she has a different nuanced version of it because of her study of history. And that's one of the things that I look forward to exploring with her when I interview her this coming week.
Yeah, I noticed that many journalists bring her out during elections and other major news happenings where they need someone like that. And I see that it appears all the networks have a Doris Kearns, but there'll never be anyone like her. But there are other historians that are sort of contributors. I see that a lot these days, and I love her perspective. I mean, So had you interviewed her previously?
I have interviewed her, but it has been a while. And then reading this book, I was reminded of her very close relationship with LBJ. For example, she went to work for him the last year of his presidency, and then she would go to Austin pretty much every weekend from Harvard, where she was teaching, to help LBJ with his memoirs. And this is just one example of how close they were personally. LBJ was afraid of dying alone, and so when he would take a nap, he would ask Doris to sit in his walk-in closet adjoining his bedroom. And so she would sit there, and she writes that it was a very odd experience to be sitting in his walk-in closet, his cowboy boots, his cowboy hats, his clothing, and she's sitting there reading a book, and she thought it was very, very odd.
That is hilarious. So when was this book published?
The book came out, the book is called Unfinished Business. And it has to do with her look back at the 60s because her husband, Dick Goodwin, was a very prominent star in under John F. Kennedy and then surprisingly also under LBJ. He was the primary speechwriter for both JFK and LBJ. And not only was he a speechwriter, he was in their inner circle of advisors. So, for example, he's the one who came up with the phrase, the Great Society. He helped prepare JFK for his debates with Nixon. He was very active in the RFK, Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy campaign before Robert was assassinated. So he was one of these Z-League type characters in the 60s. And so it has to do with her looking back at her relationship with him, but also some of the larger issues that happened in the 60s and how they continue to resonate. And unfortunately, many of them still have not been resolved.
Well, you can say that again. So, Phil, over the years, let's talk about the 25 years that you hosted Chicago Tonight. I can only imagine the breadth and width of your coverage of names as big as Doris Kearns, if not bigger. What are some of those names that stand out for you as an interviewer?
Well, I will say that Barack Obama was on our program roughly 20 times before he became president.
Of course.
So he was a frequent guest. In fact, one of the stories I tell is that he called me up to have lunch with me. And I called him back, then he called me back. And then I thought, this is just too much trouble. I dropped the ball on it. I think that was a real big mistake on my part.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
Tom, I think he was probably calling all journalists just to establish a good relationship with the press. But anyway, it was a missed opportunity.
So how did you drop the ball?
Well, I just didn't bother calling him back.
Okay. Well, I mean, okay, so.
And it really affected his career.
You probably helped him at the voting polls, though, when you finally did talk to him. I mean, come on, that's the way the relationship works, in press, right?
Well, I will tell you something that if I can brag, I moderated a debate between Barack Obama when he was running for the Senate and what's his name, Keyes, the conservative pundit from the East Coast, was brought in as a carpetbagger, basically to run against Obama because no Republican wanted to run against him. And so I moderated a debate between Barack Obama and Mr. Keyes. His first name is eluding me right now. But one of the things that I asked both candidates about was the whole issue of gay marriage. And Barack Obama kind of waffled on it. and danced around the issue and never really addressed it. And then afterwards, after the debate was over, one of Barack Obama's supporters came up to him and said, "You were not ready for Phil Ponce. You were not ready for Phil Ponce." So maybe the next time he prepared a little harder. And so I might have helped him along the way in terms of his learning curve.
Oh, I'm sure you
I
did.
doubt it.
Sure. So tell me about what was your impression of him? And I'm sure over time, as he grew and evolved, so did you. But what were your initial impressions of him?
I think my initial impressions of him were borne out by his conduct during his presidency. Number one, he is really, really smart.
Hmm.
Number two, he has a very agile mind. Number three, he was very self-contained. He was not one of these politicians that draws energy from a crowd. I don't think he likes to schmooze. I think he saw campaigning as a necessary, evil is maybe too strong a word, but there are some politicians, and you've encountered them, I'm sure, Tom, who just get energy from working a
Uh-huh.
room, who get energy from working a parade. Obama was cerebral, self-contained, and I don't think that was his favorite activity. But aside from that, he had incredible skills. He had empathy, and no one really, I think, is fully prepared for the presidency. And I think his learning curve in that office was remarkable.
And did you also interview Michelle over the years?
You know, I never interviewed Michelle Obama. One of the members of the board of trustees of Channel 11 was a financial backer of Barack Obama. And so that trustee invited Ann and me to a dinner. There were just 8 people at the dinner, and Barack and Michelle were at dinner. And that's the closest I ever got to. I think it's the only time I've been in her presence in a setting that was intimate, as opposed to seeing her on stage somewhere.
Yeah.
But again, highly poised, whip smart, and a very strong sense of who she is.
Well, we could see that, the impact they had on the crowd at the recent convention in
Mm.
Chicago. Did you by any chance cover any of that for any reason for anybody?
I did not cover it, and I will tell you, and this is one of my dirty little secrets. The only way I can watch a debate is if I am moderating it. If I'm not moderating the debate, Tom, I get so nervous that
Mm.
I can't watch it. My
Mm.
father-in-law used to tape IU basketball games,
Hmm.
and once he found out the score, he would then go back and watch what he had recorded. It was so nerve-wracking for him to watch an IU basketball game because he was so invested
Hmm.
that he couldn't watch it live. Likewise, I get out of my head
Yeah.
watching a debate, and
Yeah.
so I cannot watch it. During the debate between Kamala Harris, gosh, this is going to wreck my reputation. Not that I have one, but during the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, I was watching back episodes of Peaky Blinders on Netflix. It's the truth. It's a disgrace.
I watched with a friend of mine who was a nervous wreck through the whole thing. He just kept grabbing a pillow and he was just like, "Shut up, I want to listen." So,
Oh,
uh,
oh.
so
You're a better
Phil,
man than I, Gunga Din.
over those years, again, I would presume you had some crack producers and they kept an eye on who was coming into town and got them booked on your show. Is that the way it worked? Do you have a lot of people who were coming through and ended up on your show?
There were a lot of people coming through. Not all of them ended up on our show. Our show was called Chicago Tonight, and our focus was on Chicago. But when somebody of the stature of Doris Kearns Goodwin, of Michael Beschloss, national figures who had insights into things that our audience would be interested in, then yes.
Yeah.
So we would have national figures on. We would have, if Newt Gingrich was in town, we would have him on. One of the things that we tried to do was have a full spectrum of political and social thought on our program. And so we prided ourselves on having conservatives, libertarians, liberals. And one of the things that we assured them was that they would have the opportunity to state their case in a way that was unedited.
Hmm. Hmm. Phil, as you know, the focus of my podcast is the performing arts and, broadly entertainment in general. I have seen Chicago Tonight over the years a number of times, just check it out. And I was very interested in the way you've grown professionally from the early days when we first met. I got a big kick out of that. But at the same time, I was checking out the website, and the description of Chicago Tonight is now there wasn't a mention of the arts, but I know you covered the arts because I remember there was a segment, right?
There's still some arts coverage, not to the extent it's been shortened. The program is not a full hour like it used to be. As with so many broadcasting outlets, we're in a state of evolution. We have to straddle the line between broadcast, online, print, and it's a formula. It's a landscape that keeps evolving. But no, we did cover a lot of the arts, and there's still arts coverage, although I'm not actively involved in the program anymore. But when I think of the prominent people in the arts who I've interviewed opera singers like Renee Fleming. I've interviewed pop figures like Judy Collins, Rita Moreno, comedians like John Cleese. And so we've had a range of prominent arts figures, plus also heavy coverage of the theater, of the visual arts, and the performing arts. As you know, Chicago is a hub of theatrical activity. We have Chicago Shakespeare, we have the Goodman, and then famously, there are scores and scores of storefront theaters. There's Steppenwolf is no longer a storefront theater, but it started out as a storefront theater. So the theater scene here is very active. We have an outstanding orchestra. We have an outstanding museums. So, for example, a major show like the one that's taking place now at the Art Institute with Georgia O'Keeffe, we certainly would cover major exhibitions like that.
And I know that you were a natural for that kind of coverage, and I'm sure over the course of those 25 years, it was your opinion in your coverage that helped advance that city to the point it is. I mean, especially when I first met you, as you recall, we had a lot in common, including the fact that you had, correct me if I'm wrong, the San Francisco Conservatory, where you studied acting.
American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco.
Correct.
ACT. And you're right. I mean, my love of the performing arts, started actively in high school, where I was able to get some really good roles in the high school musicals.
Bishop Knoll and
Bishop Knoll Institute in Hammond, Indiana.
What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1967. I think Marconi had invented the radio by then. I can't remember. But I went to law school, as you may recall. I went to Indiana University, English major, speech and theater minor. I went to law school, graduated from law school, but I still had the performing bug in me. Yeah. And so after law school, I went to acting school. Yeah. And I went to acting school, but then really life interfered in all the best ways. My wife, Ann, got pregnant, and the life of an actor just was not in the cards. But I felt like my life had passed me by. So one day, as I was practicing law in the government, as a government attorney, I read an article about big city anchors and reporters, and I thought, wait a minute. It's kind of perfect, because the analytical skills that law has provided me and the performance skills that acting school and my love of acting and theater has given me, it would kind of be a perfect marriage. And so that's when I saw you on television doing a public service announcement.
Say what you think. A service of RTV6.
I think you were doing something to do with employment.
Oh, yeah. I was on a public affairs show. Do you remember my big hair?
I do not remember your big hair.
Oh, yeah. I called it a Mexfro.
I'm sure it was very imposing. But I saw you on TV. I saw the name Alvarez. I thought, another Latino. I'm going to call him and just get some advice. And you advised me to get a tape together of me on camera and then shop it around to the different stations. And you would provide an entree at the station you worked at. So I went to a production house. This is before everyone had camcorders or iPhones and such. And so I went to a production house. I memorized some news copies so that an anchor,
Mhm.
and I saw it as an acting exercise. I had this tape, and then I showed it to various news directors, and I got hired as a weekend reporter at the station you worked at. And
Well, you stole my thunder because I was going to tell that story. Now I can tell it from my perspective. You called me at home one random day, and that in itself told me that you had a lot of chutzpah. Back then, it had nothing to do like, how dare you call me at home? How'd you get my number? That kind of thing. I was just like really taken back right off the bat because that impressed me so much. And, because by then, I had been a producer for a while at the station, and I knew what it took for me to break into TV, and it just took fearlessness, and it took chutzpah, and I had to let go of any kind of preconceived notion. I had to sell myself, and I saw that quality in you immediately, and it just really intrigued me about you and just the way you presented yourself. And then the tape, that's what really compelled me to do what I could to help you because I could see the effort that you being in production myself and the fact that you went to all of that effort to pitch yourself. It was the perfect thing for you to do. And the fact that I remember the news copy that you wrote, just the whole thing. And you were sitting at this like cheesy desk and
I know, I
it was
know.
but it was perfect because I could see, and I'm proud of myself to this day because like I've been around some of the most talented people in the world, who come through Indianapolis or I've interviewed over the phone or whatever, now Zoom calls. But so I know talent when I see it. And I could see in your performance that you had that it factor. And I gave the tape. I don't know who else you sent to, but I gave the tape to Robert Gamble, the news
The news
director.
director, right?
And he was a tough cookie, that guy.
Oh, I know he was.
And the fact that you sold him on the basis of that tape, he perceived it in the way I did, that you really showed that you not only were serious, he knew it would just take a little experience and some polish, and you were right up there. And the fact that correct me if I'm wrong, this is the Hollywood part of anyone ever does a documentary on this. It's going to be great stuff, or a feature. It could be a feature film. But I understand there was an agent in town for the 500 festival or race, and they saw you randomly on the weekend news, and they whisked you off to Chicago.
Well,
I mean, isn't that true, though?
It's not exactly that, but I did send the work that I had done at WRTV to Chicago, and I cannot remember how I connected with that agent, to be honest with you. It
Well,
might have been something like
I
that.
think I heard the story that because that happened, by the way, to several people in this market. People were in town for the race and they saw these local talent. Think about it. It sounds plausible.
Oh, it does sound
Then you
possible.
were
That's
whisked away to one of the top markets in the country. It made people's heads spin in that newsroom at Channel 6 because I mean, the dream is that you start out in Terre Haute, you make it to Channel 6 at the time. I think it was the 25th market, was it back then? I don't remember.
right.
And it was a pretty good sized market.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
people came from not only Indiana, but places like, Butte, Montana, and whatever, Tulsa, Oklahoma, to make their way to Indianapolis. But many of them, the part of the strategy, I know this firsthand because I've talked to enough talent locally to know this. Then they'd have their eyes set on Chicago and then New York,
That's right.
So that's what makes your career such so we have that in common. And then, of course, that we're both Mexican American and, our roots.
You're Mexican American?
People often say to me,
I didn't know that.
well, that's probably because many people say to me, and I still, I'm amused when people say, well, you don't look Mexican. And I have a retort now, and it is, well, what does a Mexican look like? What does that mean? And then depending on who it is, I said, did you expect like someone leaning up against a cactus and a sombrero and wearing a serape, right? I mean, it's annoying, and you would think by now. But anyway, so we just had tons of. But one thing I want to get to is that you have to tell our listeners, and I joked about this earlier when Anne, we're on a Zoom call for the listeners. Many of them already know that. But apparently, you are in Anne's office.
I am on Anne's computer,
Okay.
and it's her Zoom account. But I don't know if you. My wife is a painter, and I don't know.
I was just going to comment on that. Oh my gosh, she is just amazing.
So
Describe it for
well,
our.
what you're looking at is a painting, a bunch of decorative vessels,
Mhm.
and the actual vessels are sitting on a piano right beneath the painting. And so our house is full of Anne's paintings. She is a remarkable painter. She's done a lot of portraits. She's done portraits of university presidents, including the one of the presidents of Indiana University, John Ryan, who was president, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago. But she's done portraits of business leaders, academics, and people in the arts. So
And if you
she's
look at my background, do you see that painting
yes,
right?
yes, yes. I remember that.
That's her early
I think those
painting.
are
It's called Comadres, and
comadres.
she
In other
told me
words,
that those are your relatives, and they live
yes,
in Mexico. Correct.
that's in Mexico, and that's one of her strongest paintings. And she loves to do images of people. I think one of the things that comes out in Anne's painting is her empathy and her interest and her love of
As you can
humanity.
see, it hangs permanently on my wall. And whenever people come over, that's the first thing that they see. And it's just, it's a great conversation piece. And, I just go on and on and on. And I talk about you and your family and
Ah,
so on and so forth. And, she is just a remarkable talent. And I suspect that she continues to grow in her subject matter. She's always had a new period, right?
well,
Like
no,
Picasso.
she totally is. She has been working on a major piece that she just finished. It's oil. It's a portrait of our granddaughter Maya, and it's in the style of Balthus, who did these kind of edgy paintings of young, not quite teenagers, and he was considered, kind of controversial at the time, and probably still is with this imagery. But Anne was taken with the composition, the pose, and the colors, and
How can people find her work? What is her website address?
AnnePonce.com. But
Simple, right? We're getting ahead of ourselves. There's not only Anne, I jokingly called you guys the dynasty, and I want to have you all on. I think, has anybody had you all on the air together in a show?
no,
Well, see,
no, no, not yet.
talk about documentaries. Come
People
on.
have better judgment.
I mean, and I've read a lot of press up in Chicago where they have called you a dynasty, and you guys have got a lot of press as a family. I know this, and I'm always so thrilled to see that. Tell our listeners about your family, the dynasty.
Oh, well, a dynasty presupposes that there was some planning involved, and believe me, there was no planning.
Well,
It's
for
not like
want of a better word, you guys really have become a cultural treasure in Chicago.
I don't. Well,
Go
you're
down the
very.
line. Okay, we talked about Anne, and Anne's
Dan,
work is in many collections, I'm sure by now.
they are our oldest son Dan graduated from IU, and his big fame to claim in terms of Indiana University is where he was a music major, is that he was the founder of the a cappella group Straight No Chaser. He was the original music director, and he recruited the original members. And people who know Straight No Chaser or who are from Indiana University know what has happened with that
Do
group.
you remember the day that you called me? At the time, I was an executive director of a theater company, and you called me to tell me about this group, and you were his biggest promoter, and you told me about this group, and they were coming to Indianapolis, and I think you reached out to me because you guys were looking for press opportunities. And see, I think about that too, and what has happened ever since. And And then I saw you and the family when they did their, I think it was their Indianapolis debut once they had become really big. And I was at a Christmas concert of theirs at the Murat. What
Right.
a fun memory that was.
It was an outstanding performance. It was sold out.
Didn't they debut their Christmas song about Indiana? Oh, I mean, it was just
I
something.
don't know if they debuted it there, but they certainly performed it. The fact of the matter is that it was a hometown crowd. The biggest crowd they have every year is in Indianapolis because the group started at IU, and
Mhm.
most of the members are from Indiana. Several of them from Indianapolis
Well,
itself.
come on, Dan would not be here if it weren't for you and Ann meeting at IU as students.
That's right. That's right. But so Dan was a member of the group for some time, and then after they went professional, he stayed with them for a couple of years. But then he decided he really wanted to start a family. And Straight No Chaser, as you know, tours quite a bit, and so he decided to step back from being in Straight No Chaser so that he could settle down and have a family, and that's what he's done.
Okay, now let me introduce this next segment of your family history. I got another call from Phil Ponce to tell me about young Anthony, who was looking to secure a gig at Channel 8 here in Indianapolis, which happens to be the station that my podcast emanates from, by the way. So what a great coincidence.
Anthony started out as a
Fort
reporter
Wayne,
in Fort Wayne,
my hometown.
your hometown. That's right. I believe it was at Wayne TV,
Yep.
and he started out in Fort Wayne. He was there
Yes,
for a couple.
affiliate.
He was there for a couple of years, and then he was hired by Wish in Indianapolis. He was there for a couple of very happy years, and then he was hired by the NBC station as a reporter here in Chicago. And at that point, Dan, who had started out as a reporter in Lansing, Michigan, had been hired by the ABC station in Chicago. So both of them were street reporters in the city, and that's when the whole thing about a Ponce dynasty
Yeah.
started, because they were on two of the leading commercial stations, and I was hosting the PBS station. So,
Didn't you guys all have a radio show together on someone's
yes, Dan and
platform or
Anthony had a radio
outlet?
show, and I was an occasional guest.
Oh, talk about. There's no other story like this anywhere. Come on. And
Well,
then,
listen,
and then there's Maria.
Maria is a very successful photographer here in Chicago. She does fashion, she does portraiture. She has been a photographer for the Bulls. She has
Wow.
photographed famous people. She did a very long photo shoot with Meghan Markle before she became
Really? I didn't know
yes, the
that.
Duchess of whatever she is. And I asked her, and I've asked her many times, what was Meghan Markle like? Because Meghan Markle has gotten such terrible press in many quarters, as you know. And she said back then, Meghan Markle was on the television program Suits, as you probably know, and she came in for this photo shoot where she was the cover story of the Chicago Tribune magazine at the time, Sunday magazine. And Maria said she was the consummate professional. She had no attitude. It was just her and her then husband, and she knew exactly how to pose and was a very easy person to work with.
Mhm.
But she's also done Chance the Rapper. Who else has she done? She's done other sports figures and local celebrities. And she's the photographer for Lululemon. They do a lot of the yoga clothing and that sort of thing. So,
Good.
so
Does
Maria,
she and Ann still share a studio space?
not anymore, not
Okay.
anymore. But once
I
upon
remember last time I saw Maria was I visited your family in the I think it's an over 100-year-old former stable.
it
Is that
was a
right?
stable. It
And are
was a
you
sta
still there in that home?
No, no, no. We have that was in the city of Chicago itself. It was in the Ravenswood neighborhood. About a year ago, we sold that home and we moved to the northern suburbs. We now our children live in the northern suburbs, and it has made a huge difference because we moved here to be closer to our children and to be closer to our grandchildren. And so
Oh,
we have downsized. We're living in a small house, but on a big property, and we are in the process of transforming it into the landscaping design that was executed by one of the most famous landscape architects in the country. He's considered the Frank Lloyd Wright of landscape
And
architecture.
who is that?
His name is Jens Jensen.
Okay.
If you Google him, he's a step below in fame from the people who did the man who did Central Park,
Olmsted.
Olmsted, right,
Olmsted. And
right.
he did the IMA too, the Indianapolis Museum of Art.
Is that right? Well,
Mhm.
Jens Jensen, if you look him up, he has done he was the first person to recognize native plants as worthy of incorporating into landscaping. Before Jensen, everything was centered on Europe and trying to emulate European gardens, English gardens, formal French gardens. Jensen was the first person to look at the native plants, the native oaks, the native sumacs, the native service berries, the native hawthorns, the native grasses, the native flowers like coneflowers as elements of landscaping that deserve promotion.
Mhm.
And it also made tremendous sense because, Tom, I don't know how much gardening you've done, but if you
I
have a
have,
full,
and I remember last time I saw you, you had just become interested in gardening.
well,
And you lived in the stable.
that interest has continued. And as you know, if you try and establish non-native plants, it doesn't always go well. But if you stick with the native plants, the things that we're here to begin with, like hawthorns, like red buds, like the native grasses, they thrive because this is their home. And so that's
Yeah,
what Jens Jensen recognized. And when
yeah.
we bought this property, there was an unexecuted landscape design for this property by Jens Jensen that Ann and I are implementing.
Okay. How old is the house you live in? Is it
It was built in 1940, and the original owners were friends with Jensen, and he came up with this design for the property, which is an acre and a half. And for whatever reason, it was never implemented. I don't know if it was cost, expense, or whatever, but that's what we're in the process of doing now.
Hmm. Wow, it sounds like your life is full without broadcasting.
I am still doing some broadcasting with son Anthony, who is a morning anchor at the Fox station. And by the way,
Okay, WFLD, correct?
WFLD, very good. And the
Uh,
local stations, even though they're owned by Fox, they are apolitical. So
uh,
they're not like the
yeah,
Fox station, Fox
yeah,
cable,
Fox
that sort of
News.
thing.
Yeah,
And so we
yeah.
do this segment on Fox called My Dad Phil. And I dispense words of wisdom.
So are you
And
the straight man in that duel?
no, I think Anthony's a straight man.
I saw a Facebook post recently, and he was showing off the suit that Anne made for you in the
Oh,
70s.
right. He was wearing a white cotton twill suit that
You
Anne made for
know,
me.
he felt like a nephew to, well, I've known your children since they were toddlers when you lived in Indianapolis. So again, they feel like nephews and nieces to me. And when he lived here in Indianapolis, I really miss our infrequent, we would meet for lunch and all. And, all of your children have turned out to be just really kind, generous, beautiful people, I
Well,
think. So
thank you.
you and Ann did a great job, but
Thank you
you
very
have
much.
been great parents ever since I've known you. So let's talk about what we have in common too in terms of our backgrounds. I'm very proud of the fact that I was one of the there were only a handful of us, but I have been designated, and people did some research, and it turns out I was the very first Latino on the air, not news, but, public affairs. And then, of course, what you brought to the table in terms of representation, I'm proud that we were ahead of the pack and hopefully opened doors for others who came around after us. And does that make you proud, Phil?
You know what? I don't think of it often, but there have been instances where someone who's a younger Latino has mentioned to me that, yeah, when I saw you on TV, when I saw you on Channel 2, it occurred to me that, maybe I could do the same thing. So I take a lot of satisfaction from that. But let's not forget the people who gave us opportunities, Tom. You mentioned Bob Gamble. He was a tough nut and very, very smart. And he gave me a chance. He didn't have to, but he took a chance on me. And so there were people who gave us the opportunities. And, the old cliche that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And so, you and I must have been kind of prepared. And when this opportunity came up, from forward-thinking people like Bob Gamble, that made a difference.
And in my case, you'll be interested to know, and then indirectly, you're part of this or what happened. I was literally recruited from Fort Wayne because they had, if you recall, Channel 6 had a minority advisory committee made up of African Americans and Latinos. And it was because of that advisory committee, it made it possible for you and you and me to become recruited, if you will, to be part of that effort to, affirmative action, actually, which has become a pejorative for some. But in any case, I had two mentors. The fellow who first told me about the opening, he was a Mexican-American business owner in Fort Wayne. And the other was like a sort of an activist for farm workers, Benny Lopez. So those two indirectly made it possible for me and you. So I think about them often. Then I had two other mentors who were part of that committee, and they were African-American women. One was a lawyer, and one was the first Black TV executive at Channel 6, Judy Wall. I don't know if you remember Judy. So those people were the ones who made it possible for us. And
hey, listen, if I can interject, we can never forget that we're standing on the shoulders of other people. And
absolutely.
And if other people are standing on our shoulders, to me, that's a thrill and an honor.
I trained Phil at Channel 6 went on to have careers that went way beyond anything I've ever done. And that makes me very, very pleased and then it continues. And I'm sure in Indianapolis does not look anywhere near it was when you were on the air.
No.
African-American, Asian, openly, I hate using that word, but LGTB, it's not a big deal here in the market anymore. So, and I'm for sure Chicago reflects the same kind of evolution, does it not?
I would say so. Keep in mind that Chicago is one of the capitals of Blue America, for want of a better phrase. So but the other thing that I like so much about Chicago is that it's a working class city at its roots. It has a very Midwestern approach to life in that you better not be full of yourself. You better not, because you'll go down a peg. And I know it's that way in Indianapolis.
You and I also had that in common. My father was a factory worker, former farm worker, San Antonio, Texas, and you came from McAllen, Texas, and your parents were steel workers.
That's correct. Both of them were steel workers, and there is in me, and as I assume there is in you, a continuing appreciation for our blue-collar roots.
Absolutely.
Because if it hadn't been for the sacrifices that your family made for you and my family made for me, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
You had a large family, remind me, and Stella was probably your only sibling that I got to know. Please give her my regards.
Thank you very much. I came from a big family. There were 9 children in our family. I'm the third oldest. There were 3 boys and 6 girls. And thank God, we're all still alive. We all still get along. Not all of us are on the same page politically as the others, but we're not the only family doing
No, I didn't realize that you can't. I come from a family of 9.
I think we've had this conversation.
Oh my goodness. And you know what? Unfortunately, 2 of them have passed away, but and I'm sure, I follow all of your family members on Facebook, and your family continues to grow. You're a grandfather how many times?
5 times. And
5 times.
I have 3 priorities in life. They are my relationship with Anne, my relationship with my grandchildren, and number 3, trying to make myself a better person.
Yeah.
So those are the priorities that I have.
And then, of course, one
And
of
by the
the
way, on that third one, I got a long way to go.
so of course too, I've seen on your Facebook on various Facebook pages the fact that and we have this in common too, Phil. I've been there several times. San Miguel Allende,
San Miguel, yes.
a big part of your history now, isn't
Well,
it?
yeah, Maria got married there, and
I
we have been
know.
there. We have been there a bunch of times. It's a beautiful, beautiful town in about an hour north of Mexico. It's very picturesque. It's very quaint. It's often used as a movie set because I think it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Uh,
Wasn't there a Brad Pitt movie down there? Old
I
Mexico? I
I
can't
don't
remember.
know,
Yeah, yeah.
but you know who died there? It was either Neil Cassidy or Jack Kerouac.
Oh my.
They died, they were found dead on the railroad tracks right outside of San Miguel de Allende.
Did you ever read the book that got the whole thing started on Mexican time?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I read it. It was a person who moved to San Miguel from California, and it talks about how his introduction into San Miguel. He tells some amazing stories
Mhm.
about San Miguel, including, I don't know if you remember this one, the man who killed somebody twice. It was there was a bookstore owner, and somebody was having an affair with his wife, and so the bookstore owner shot the man and put the man in his trunk because there are these open pit mines outside of town, and he was going to dump the body in one of these open pit mines. And so he opens the trunk, and the man is still alive. And so he drags
I
the
remember.
body out of the car and pummels him to death again with a shovel. Just as he's dragging the body to the pit, a police car comes by, sees the whole thing, and arrests him. And at trial, the judge said, well, certainly no one can blame you for killing him the first time. It was a matter of honor. He was disgracing your honor by having an affair with your wife. But killing him the second time, that was too much. So he went to prison.
I remember that book had a huge influence on people moving to Mexico. But I understand that the retiree community from America has just grown and grown and grown. I hope there aren't any golden arches there, though. I hope they maintain the historical integrity.
I think
Yeah.
the only
Well,
golden
there are
arches.
Walmarts in Mexico, and
Oh,
there's
sure. I think the only arches in San Miguel that Americans have brought are in their shoes.
oh, good one. Well, so one more thing I want to ask you about is, are you still teaching at Loyola?
I was a lecturer and visiting professional in residence at Loyola University Chicago, I don't know, for about 20 years.
Okay.
And I just wrapped that up last year.
Oh, you did.
Right. I finally thought, you know what? That's enough. But I still go down there occasionally when one of my former faculty colleagues says, would you mind coming and giving a presentation on
Did you
interviewing?
enjoy teaching, Phil?
Uh, I enjoyed the classroom aspect of it. As far as the grading papers and all that stuff,
No.
absolutely not. It's
Yeah.
horrific.
Yeah.
Any teacher in this country should have their salary doubled, as far as I'm concerned. It is
Yeah.
really hard and essential work.
Yeah. So last question, are you performing? You were also a singer, as I recall, and you were with the choir. Was it
I started,
was
I
it a,
started a group called the
did I
Chicago
imagine
Choirmen.
this, or was it a Swedish choir, or it was something just really interesting? I can't remember.
It was a group called the Chicago Choirmen. It was a male a cappella group. Dan took a little inspiration from that when he started Straight No Chaser
Okay.
at New Trier. But yeah, I started a men's chorus. It was around for 10 years, and
Yeah.
then it had its beginning, middle, and end.
So are
It
you
was
doing any performing of any kind anymore?
I am not. I am not. Sometimes I threaten to go back to the boards.
Hey, you never lose your talent. I mean, now you can do those character roles. I still have a black and white photo you gave for my office wall. You signed it, and I think it was Taming of the Shrew.
It was something like that, right?
Yeah. I hope to touch base with the Ponce family on my next trip to Chicago. I haven't been there for a while. But it's so great to see you again and to rekindle our long friendship. And please give my regards to all the kids. They'll always be kids to me, and let them know that I think of you all frequently. And do you ever get back to Indiana or Indianapolis for any
Not too
reason?
much, but Tom, if I can just close by saying something to your listeners, even if you're not, quote, actively involved in the arts, you don't have to be a painter, a singer, a playwright. You don't have to fully carry the mantle of culture, but each of us in our own small way can promote the arts by being appreciative audience members, of buying an occasional painting, even if it's only, a $50 painting at an art fair or a $100 painting at an art fair. It's important for us as part of the chain of humanity to keep supporting people who are creative. Because look, what do we look at when we look at past civilizations? What are the things that attract us? The art, the sculpture, the design. It's the arts that reflect a culture, and we're all a part of that culture. So let's all do something to promote the creative force that all of us are a part of.
Well said, my friend. Well said. Okay, well, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate it.
Nice to talk to you, Phil.
Pleasure is mine.
Buenos dias.
Thanks, Tom.
Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official neighborhood newsletter for 16 Indianapolis neighborhoods, offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.